The spring of 1878 arrived with unforgiving rains that turned the dirt roads of Willow Creek, Colorado into treacherous mud traps. But that was the least of Nora Armstrong's concerns as she clutched her swollen belly and stepped down from the stagecoach, her face hidden beneath the wide brim of her worn bonnet. 6 months pregnant, alone, and with nothing but a small carpetbag containing her meager possessions, she had traveled west on the desperate hope that her cousin's husband might take pity on her, only to discover upon arrival that they had moved on to California months ago. The stagecoach driver tipped his hat. "Sorry, miss. Wish I had better news for you. Town's got a boarding house down yonder, though rates ain't cheap." Nora nodded silently, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. She had exactly $3.42 to her name, not enough for even a week's board. The shame of her situation weighed heavier than her unborn child. Back in Boston, her family had disowned her the moment they discovered her condition, and Edmund, the baby's father, had quickly married a banker's daughter, leaving Nora to face her disgrace alone. "Thank you," she murmured, gathering her strength as she made her way down the muddy street. Willow Creek was a modest frontier town. A main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a church with a white steeple, a general store, saloon, and a handful of other establishments that served the ranchers and miners in the surrounding area. Nora's fine education and city upbringing seemed worthless here, but she had no choice but to find work, and quickly. The boarding house matron, Mrs. Halloway, a stern-faced woman with iron-gray hair, looked Nora up and down, her eyes lingering disapprovingly on her belly. "I don't take in women in your condition," she said flatly. "Bad for business. Respectable folk don't want to associate with—" "Please," Nora interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have nowhere else to go." "That's not my concern," Mrs. Halloway replied. "Try the saloon. They might have work for a pretty face, though, in your state." She shrugged and closed the door. Standing alone on the porch, Nora gripped her carpetbag tighter. The saloon was not an option. She would rather sleep in the street. With determined steps, she made her way to the general store, hoping for any kind of employment. The bell above the door jingled as she entered. An elderly man with spectacles perched on his nose glanced up from behind the counter. "Can I help you, miss?" "I hope so, sir," Nora said, gathering her courage. "I'm looking for work. I can read and write well, keep accounts, and I'm not afraid of hard labor." The shopkeeper's gaze followed the same path as Mrs. Halloway's. "When's the baby due?" 3 months, she admitted. He shook his head. "Sorry, miss. I need someone who can lift crates and stock shelves. You should be resting, not working." By nightfall, Nora had visited every establishment in town with the same result. No one wanted to hire a woman in her condition, especially one without a husband. As the sun began to set, she found herself sitting on a bench outside the church, her options dwindling with the daylight. "You look like you could use a hot meal." Startled, Nora looked up to see a young woman about her age with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "I'm Rachel, the doctor's wife," she said, sitting beside Nora. "You're new in town." "Nora Armstrong," she replied, too exhausted to maintain pretenses. "I arrived today hoping to find my cousin, but they've moved on." Rachel nodded sympathetically. "And no one will hire you because of the baby." Nora looked down, ashamed. "I have nowhere to go." "Come with me," Rachel said, standing. "My husband and I have a spare room. You can stay with us tonight, and tomorrow we'll figure something out." That night, in the warmth of Dr. Thomas and Rachel Wilson's home, Nora ate her first proper meal in days. As she sipped hot tea at their kitchen table, she found herself telling them her story, how she had fallen in love with Edmund Worthington, believed his promises, and been abandoned when her pregnancy was discovered. "I thought we would marry," she confessed. "But his family had other plans, and he chose their approval over me." Dr. Wilson exchanged a look with his wife. Willow Creek isn't Boston, he said gently. But folks here can be just as judgmental. Have you considered what you'll do when the baby comes? Nora's hand instinctively went to her belly. Keep it, of course. This child is all I have. Rachel reached across the table and squeezed her hand. There's a rancher outside of town, Liam O'Connor. He lost his wife in childbirth 2 years ago. He's been looking for someone to help with his daughter and the household. It's hard work, but he's a good man. Would he hire someone like me? Nora asked doubtfully. I don't know, Rachel admitted. But he needs help desperately and you need work. It's worth asking. The next morning, Rachel's husband drove Nora out to the O'Connor ranch in his buggy. The journey took nearly an hour, following a winding road that led away from town and into rolling grasslands dotted with stands of pine. In the distance, the Rocky Mountains rose majestically against the clear blue sky. There it is, Dr. Wilson said, pointing to a collection of buildings nestled in a valley. The Circle O. As they approached, Nora could see a modest but well-built ranch house, a large barn, a bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. Several horses grazed in a corral, and cattle dotted the surrounding pastures. It was a working ranch, prosperous but not ostentatious. Dr. Wilson pulled the buggy to a stop in front of the house. Wait here, he said, helping Nora down before approaching the door. A moment later, a man emerged, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a strong jaw shadowed by several days' growth of beard. Liam O'Connor looked every inch the rugged rancher. His clothes were practical: a faded blue shirt, worn denim pants, and scuffed boots, but clean and well-maintained. He was younger than Nora had expected, perhaps 30, with eyes the color of a summer storm. Those eyes narrowed as they took in Nora's condition. She straightened her spine and met his gaze directly, refusing to show shame despite the heat rising in her cheeks. Dr. Wilson explained her situation in low tones. Nora couldn't hear what was said, but she could see the rancher's expression shift from skepticism to consideration. Miss Armstrong, he finally said, approaching her. His voice was deep, with the barest hint of an Irish accent. Dr. Wilson says you're looking for work. Yes, sir, she replied. I can cook, clean, and sew. I've taught children, kept household accounts, and I'm willing to learn whatever else is needed. And the baby? He asked bluntly, nodding toward her belly. Nora swallowed hard. The baby comes with me, Mr. O'Connor. I won't give it up. A small sound from the doorway drew their attention. A little girl, no more than 2 years old, with dark curls and her father's gray eyes, peered around the door frame. That's Lily, Liam said, his voice softening. My daughter. Nora smiled at the child, who hid her face shyly. Hello, Lily. Liam seemed to come to a decision. Here's what I can offer. Room and board for you and your child when it comes. $5 a month wage. In return, you'll keep house, cook meals, and help with Lily. I've got 2 ranch hands who bunk in the bunkhouse, but they take their meals here. It was far less than a housekeeper would normally earn, but Nora had no alternatives. Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. I accept. There's one more thing, he added, his expression serious. This is ranch country. Folks around here are decent, but they're traditional. If you come to work here, there will be talk. There already is talk, Mr. O'Connor, she replied quietly. But I appreciate your concern. Dr. Wilson cleared his throat. I'll leave you to get settled, then. Rachel will send out some of her things for you, Nora. After the doctor departed, Liam showed Nora to a small but clean bedroom at the back of the house. It contained a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a rocking chair by the window. This was my wife's sewing room, he explained. Lily sleeps across the hall. My room is at the front of the house. It's lovely, Nora said honestly. Thank you. Get settled. I'll introduce you to the hands at supper. He paused at the door. Miss Armstrong, I don't pry into people's pasts, and I expect the same courtesy. We all have our burdens to bear. With that cryptic statement, he left her alone. Nora sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the sudden change in her circumstances. 24 hours ago, she had been despairing on a bench outside the church. Now she had a roof over her head and employment. It wasn't the life she had imagined for herself, but it was a chance for her and for her baby. The next few weeks established a routine. Nora rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Liam and his ranch hands, Jake and Samuel, two brothers from Tennessee who treated her with awkward courtesy. She spent her days cleaning, cooking, and caring for Lily, who quickly became attached to her. Liam remained distant but respectful. He worked from sunrise to sunset, returning for meals but saying little. Sometimes she would catch him watching her with an unreadable expression, but he never asked about her past or the father of her child. One evening in late May, as Nora sat on the porch mending one of Liam's shirts while Lily played with a wooden horse nearby, she heard hoof beats approaching. Looking up, she saw a woman riding toward the house, her posture straight and confident. The woman reined her horse to a stop and dismounted gracefully. She was perhaps 40, handsome rather than pretty, with streaks of silver in her dark hair. "You must be the housekeeper," she said, eyeing Nora's pregnancy with thinly veiled disapproval. "I'm Margaret Thornton. My ranch borders Liam's to the north." "Nora Armstrong," she replied, setting aside her mending and rising awkwardly to her feet. "Mr. O'Connor is out checking the north pasture." "I know. I passed him on the way. I thought I'd stop by and see this arrangement for myself." Margaret's gaze was assessing. "You're not from around here." "No, madam. I'm from Boston." "Boston," Margaret repeated, as if the word explained everything. "Well, Miss Armstrong, you should know that Liam O'Connor is well respected in this county. His wife, Sarah, was my niece. Her death nearly destroyed him." Nora's heart squeezed with sympathy. "I'm very sorry for your loss, Mrs. Thornton." "Are you?" Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Then perhaps you'll understand why I'm concerned about his reputation and little Lily's future. A man in his position shouldn't have an unwed mother living under his roof." Before Nora could respond, Lily toddled over and tugged at her skirt. "Now, thirsty." "Of course, sweetheart," Nora said, grateful for the interruption. "Would you care for some tea, Mrs. Thornton?" The older woman's expression softened slightly as she looked at Lily. "No, thank you. I should be going." "But Miss Armstrong," she fixed Nora with a stern look, "this is a small community. We look after our own." After Margaret departed, Nora took Lily inside, her hands trembling as she poured the child a cup of milk. The encounter had rattled her more than she wanted to admit. She had been naive to think she could escape judgment, even here. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Nora found Liam sitting alone on the porch, smoking a pipe as he gazed out at the stars. "Mrs. Thornton visited today," she said quietly, standing in the doorway. Liam exhaled a cloud of smoke. "Margaret always did fancy herself the guardian of county morals. She's concerned about your reputation." "And yours?" he asked, glancing at her. Nora gave a small, sad smile. "My reputation was lost long before I came to Colorado, Mr. O'Connor." He studied her for a moment, then gestured to the chair beside him. "Sit, Miss Armstrong. Your feet must be tired." Gratefully, she lowered herself into the chair. Her back ached constantly these days, and her ankles swelled by evening. "Margaret means well," Liam said after a while. "Sarah was her sister's daughter. She's protective of her memory and of Lily." "Understandably so," Nora murmured. "But she forgets that I'm a grown man who can make his own decisions." He tapped his pipe against the porch railing. "You're a good housekeeper, Miss Armstrong. Lily adores you. I don't give a damn what the gossips say." His words warmed her, but Nora knew the reality was more complicated. "Thank you, but Mrs. Thornton isn't wrong. Your standing in the community matters, especially for Lily's sake." Liam turned to look at her directly, his gray eyes reflecting the fading light. Who was he? The father. The question caught her off guard. "A man from a good family," she finally said. "We were. I thought we would marry. But he abandoned you when you fell pregnant." It wasn't a question, but Nora nodded. "His family had arranged a more advantageous match. I was merely the daughter of a schoolteacher, educated but without fortune or connections." "And your family?" "They disowned me," she said simply. "My father is a deacon in our church. The scandal was too much." Liam was silent for a long moment. "People can be cruel in the name of propriety," he finally said. "Even family." There was something in his tone that made Nora wonder about his own past, but she respected his privacy as he had respected hers. "It's getting chilly," he said, rising from his chair. "You should rest. Morning comes early." As June bloomed across the plains, bringing wildflowers and longer days, Nora's pregnancy advanced. Dr. Wilson visited twice to check on her, pronouncing her healthy but advising more rest. Liam quietly reduced her duties, hiring a local girl to come in 3 times a week to help with the heavier work. One sweltering afternoon, Nora was teaching Lily her letters at the kitchen table when they heard shouting from the direction of the corral. Looking out the window, she saw Liam and Jake struggling with a half-broken stallion. As she watched, the horse reared violently, throwing Liam against the corral fence. "Stay here, Lily," Nora instructed, hurrying outside as quickly as her condition allowed. By the time she reached the corral, Jake and Samuel had subdued the horse. Liam was sitting in the dirt, his face pale with pain. "It's nothing," he insisted as she approached. "Just wrenched my shoulder." "You need to let me look at it," Nora said firmly, helping him to his feet. "Jake, can you bring some ice from the spring house?" In the kitchen, she made Liam sit while she examined his shoulder. "It's not dislocated," she said, relief evident in her voice. "But you've strained it badly. You'll need to rest it for a few days." "I don't have time for rest," he growled, wincing as she applied a cold compress. "We're moving the herd to summer pasture next week. Then Jake and Samuel will have to manage without you," she replied, unmoved by his protest. "Unless you want to risk permanent damage." Lily, who had been watching wide-eyed from her chair, climbed down and patted her father's knee. "Papa hurt." Liam's expression softened immediately. "Just a little flour. I'll be fine." "Papa needs medicine," Lily declared, looking at Nora for confirmation. "Indeed he does," Nora agreed, unable to suppress a smile. "And plenty of rest." Liam's eyes met hers over his daughter's head, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. "I see I'm outnumbered." That evening, Nora brought a tray to his room, the first time she had entered it since arriving at the ranch. It was sparsely furnished but neat, with a large bed, a chest of drawers, and a small desk covered with ranch accounts. Liam was sitting up in bed, his injured arm in a makeshift sling. "You didn't have to bring this," he said as she set the tray on the bedside table. "I could have come to the table." "Doctor's orders," she reminded him. "Well, not a real doctor, but I've had some experience with injuries." "Have you now?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Another hidden talent, Miss Armstrong? My father may have been strict, but he believed in education for both his sons and daughters," she explained, pouring him a cup of coffee. "I assisted Dr. Mitchell in Boston several times when he treated students at my father's school." Liam regarded her thoughtfully. "You're full of surprises." "Not really," she demurred. Just a woman trying to make her way. A brave one, he said quietly. Not many would have the courage to journey west alone in your condition. His words touched her deeply. I didn't feel brave, she admitted. Just desperate. Sometimes they're the same thing. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Nora felt a connection that went beyond employer and employee. Flustered, she busied herself adjusting his pillows. You should eat while it's hot, she said, moving toward the door. Call if you need anything else. Over the next few days, as Liam grudgingly followed her instructions to rest, their relationship subtly shifted. He began asking about her life in Boston, listening attentively as she described her father's school and her love of literature. In turn, he told her about growing up on a small farm in Pennsylvania, the son of Irish immigrants who had fled the potato famine. My father wanted me to be a blacksmith like him, he explained as they sat on the porch one evening, watching the sunset. But I had dreams of open spaces. So you came west, Nora said. He nodded. Worked as a cowhand for 5 years. Saved every penny. Bought this land when it was nothing but grass and promise. You've built something wonderful here, she said sincerely. Sarah and I did, he corrected gently. She was the daughter of a rancher over in South Park. Knew more about cattle than I did when we married. It was the first time he had spoken voluntarily about his late wife. Nora remained quiet, allowing him to continue if he wished. She died bringing Lily into the world, he said after a moment, his voice low. There were complications. By the time we got the doctor, it was too late. I'm so sorry, Liam, Nora whispered, unconsciously using his first name. He glanced at her, but didn't comment on the familiarity. For a long time I was angry. At God, at myself for not getting help sooner. Even at Lily sometimes, though I'm ashamed to admit it. That's natural, Nora assured him. Grief isn't rational. No, it isn't. He was silent for a moment. When's your baby due? Late August, according to Dr. Wilson. Liam nodded, his expression serious. I want you to know that whatever happens, you and your child will be provided for. I've arranged with my lawyer in town to ensure it. Startled, Nora stared at him. That's incredibly generous, but unnecessary. I've been saving my wages. $5 a month won't get you far, he said bluntly. And childbirth is dangerous, as I know too well. If something happens to you, your baby won't be alone. Tears filled Nora's eyes at his unexpected kindness. Thank you, she whispered. As July ripened into August, Nora's preparations for the baby became more urgent. She fashioned a cradle from a wooden crate, lining it with soft blankets and placing it in her room. Rachel Wilson sent over a bundle of baby clothes, and even Mrs. Halloway from the boarding house contributed a hand-knitted blanket, her earlier rejection apparently forgotten. The heat was oppressive, making Nora's final weeks of pregnancy increasingly uncomfortable. Liam insisted she rest during the hottest part of the day, often taking Lily with him on short rides around the property to give Nora time alone. One such afternoon, as she dozed in the rocking chair by her window, she was awakened by the sound of hoofbeats. Looking out, she saw Margaret Thornton dismounting, her expression determined. With a sigh, Nora smoothed her hair and went to greet her visitor. Mrs. Thornton, she said, opening the door. Liam and Lily are out checking fences. Would you like to wait? Margaret stepped inside, removing her gloves. Actually, Miss Armstrong, I came to speak with you. Apprehension tightened Nora's chest, but she gestured toward the kitchen. Would you care for some lemonade? It's freshly made. Once they were seated at the kitchen table, Margaret came straight to the point. There's talk in town about you and Liam. I'm not surprised, Nora replied calmly. People will gossip. This is more than gossip, Margaret said firmly. Reverend Clark mentioned it during his sermon last Sunday. He didn't name names, but everyone knew who he meant when he spoke about the dangers of taking in fallen women. Nora flinched at the term but maintained her composure. I'm sorry if my presence has caused difficulties for Liam. Are you? Margaret studied her intently. Because I'm beginning to think you're exactly where you want to be. What do you mean? I mean that Liam O'Connor is a catch wealthy by local standards, respected and unattached. A woman in your position might see him as a solution to her problems. The accusation stung all the more because Nora couldn't deny the growing feelings she harbored for Liam, feelings she had tried desperately to suppress. Mrs. Thornton, she said carefully, I came here seeking employment, not a husband. Liam has been kind to me, but our relationship is strictly proper. Perhaps on your side, Margaret conceded, but I've known Liam for years. The way he looks at you isn't the way a man looks at his housekeeper. Nora's heart fluttered traitorously. You're mistaken. I don't think I am, Margaret sighed. Which is why I've come to make you an offer. My sister in Denver owns a millinery shop. She needs help, and she's willing to take you on after the baby comes. I'll pay for your room and board until you're back on your feet. The offer was generous, far more than Nora had any right to expect. Why would you do this? Because I believe you're a decent woman who made a mistake, Margaret replied frankly. And because I loved my niece. Sarah would want Lily to have a mother who could hold her head up in this community. The implication was clear. Nora, with her illegitimate child, could never be that mother. Think about it, Margaret said, rising. Let me know your decision before the baby arrives. After she left, Nora remained at the table, her thoughts in turmoil. Margaret's offer represented security for her and her child, an opportunity to start fresh in Denver, away from the judgment of Willow Creek. It was more than she had dared hope for when she arrived in Colorado. And yet, the thought of leaving the Circle O, of leaving Liam and Lily, filled her with an ache that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. That evening, as she tucked Lily into bed, the little girl looked up at her with innocent curiosity. Baby coming soon? Yes, sweetheart, Nora replied, smoothing the child's dark curls. Very soon. Baby stay here? With me and Papa? The question pierced Nora's heart. I don't know, Lily. We'll see. Later, unable to sleep, Nora sat on the porch, watching as heat lightning illuminated the distant mountains. The air was heavy with the promise of a storm, matching her troubled mood. The screen door creaked, and Liam stepped out, a cup of coffee in his hand. Can't sleep, she shook her head. The baby's restless tonight. He sat beside her, the wooden chair groaning slightly under his weight. Margaret came by today. Yes, Nora said, unsurprised that he knew. She made me an offer. Denver, he said, his voice carefully neutral. A fresh start. You knew. She spoke to me last week about it. He took a sip of his coffee. It's a good opportunity for you and the baby. It is, Nora agreed, studying his profile in the dim light. Mrs. Thornton is concerned about appearances. Liam snorted softly. Margaret's always been concerned about appearances. She's not wrong, Nora pointed out. People are talking. The Reverend mentioned us in his sermon. Clark's a pompous ass, Liam said dismissively. What people think doesn't matter to me. It should, Nora insisted. For Lily's sake, if not your own. Liam was quiet for a long moment. Is that why you're considering Margaret's offer? Because of what people might say? Partly, she admitted. But also because it's a chance for my child to have a normal life, away from the stigma of illegitimacy. And what about you? He asked, turning to face her. What do you want, Nora? The use of her first name, rare from his lips, made her pulse quicken. I want what's best for my baby. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give, she replied softly. I don't have the luxury of choosing based on my own desires. Liam set his cup down with more force than necessary. What if you did? What if you could choose based solely on what you want? Then, she hesitated, gathering her courage. Then I would stay, here with you and Lily. The admission hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. Then stay, he said simply. Stay not as my housekeeper, but as my wife. Nora stared at him, certain she had misheard. What? Marry me? Liam said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. I'm not offering out of pity or obligation. These past months, watching you with Lily, seeing your strength and grace despite everything you've endured, I've come to care for you, Nora, more than I thought possible after Sarah. Liam, she whispered, overwhelmed. You can't mean it. The baby? I'll claim you and the baby both, he said firmly. Raise it as my own alongside Lily. No one would dare question it then. Hope bloomed in Nora's heart, but caution tempered it. People would always know. They would whisper that you married a fallen woman. Let them whisper, he said, reaching for her hand. I lost someone I loved once because help came too late. I won't stand by and watch you leave when I have the power to offer you a home, a real home, not just employment. Is that all this is? She asked, needing to be certain. A rescue? No, he said, his fingers tightening around hers. It's more. Much more if you'll have me. The first fat drops of rain began to fall, pattering on the porch roof. Nora looked into Liam's eyes and saw not pity or resignation, but genuine affection, perhaps even the beginnings of love. Yes, she said, her voice steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes. I'll marry you, Liam O'Connor. His smile was like sunrise breaking through clouds. Leaning forward, he kissed her gently at first, then with growing certainty as she responded. They were married 3 days later in the parlor of the Circle O, with Dr. and Rachel Wilson as witnesses. Reverend Clark had refused to perform the ceremony, but a circuit judge passing through Willow Creek was happy to oblige. Margaret Thornton attended, her expression a mixture of resignation and cautious approval. I hope you know what you're doing, she told Liam after the brief ceremony. For the first time in 2 years, he replied, watching as Nora showed Lily her wedding ring. I believe I do. 2 weeks later, as August gave way to September, Nora went into labor during a violent thunderstorm. Unable to fetch the doctor from town due to washed-out roads, Liam and Rachel Wilson helped deliver a healthy baby girl, whom they named Hope. She's perfect, Liam whispered, cradling the newborn while Nora rested. Just like her mother. Lily, allowed into the bedroom to meet her new sister, peered curiously at the tiny bundle. Baby stay now? She asked, echoing her question from weeks before. Yes, Flower, Liam assured her, his eyes meeting Nora's over their daughters' heads. The baby stays. We're a family now. In the months that followed, the gossip gradually subsided as the people of Willow Creek came to accept the new Mrs. O'Connor. If some still whispered behind their hands when Nora brought Hope to church, they did so quietly, mindful of Liam's protective presence beside his wife. The following spring, as wildflowers once again carpeted the plains, Nora stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching as Liam taught Lily to ride her first pony. Hope, now crawling and beginning to pull herself up on furniture, played contentedly at her feet. Mrs. O'Connor, Jake called, riding up to the house. Mail from town. Among the letters was one postmarked from Boston. Nora recognized her mother's handwriting immediately. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside was a brief note. Your father has softened his position. We would like to know our grandchildren. If you can find it in your heart to forgive us, please write. Tears blurred Nora's vision as she read. Liam, noticing her distress, handed Lily to Jake and came to her side. "Bad news?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "No," she said, showing him the letter. "Unexpected news." He read it quickly, his expression guarded. "What will you tell them?" Nora looked at Hope, then at Lily, who was proudly demonstrating her writing skills. Finally, she gazed up at her husband, this man who had claimed her when no one else would, who had given her not just security but love. "I'll tell them about our family," she said. "About how sometimes the road to happiness takes unexpected turns. About how the place where you're most broken can become the place where you're most loved." Liam wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "And are you loved?" Nora leaned into his embrace, her heart full. "Beyond measure," she assured him. "Just as you are." As the sun began its descent toward the mountains, casting long shadows across the land they had come to share, Nora thought about the journey that had brought her here, the shame and desperation that had driven her west, the courage it had taken to start anew. She had arrived in Willow Creek believing herself alone and unwanted. Now, in Liam's arms, with their daughters nearby, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. "I'll claim you and the baby both," he had promised that night on the porch, and he had kept that promise, giving her not just his name but his heart. Some might call it rescue. Nora knew it by its true name, redemption. For both of them,